Well, how's everybody doing? Ready to do this? Almost on time. I will introduce myself real quick because Joe sent me a text message and told me to introduce myself, which means I assume he's not going to be waltzing in here to do it. But my name is Ben Greenfield, and I've done Ironman Coeur d'Alene a couple times and some other events, and I'm a triathlon coach. So my goal is to help everybody here get to the starting line feeling confident with a smile on your face and ready to rumble here. And what, anybody got the exact number of days memorized,
90.
written down in your training plan somewhere? It's basically like close to 12 weeks, which is obviously why we're doing this as kind of the 12-week out point. But for any of you who haven't been to any of the talks that I've given here or anything like that, super Q&A intensive. So at any point, if you have questions, the way we're going to do this seminar tonight, just raise your hand rather than waiting all the way until the end, just because we're kind of going in chronological order. So it's going to be easier for you kind of at the point where we're at leading up to Ironman. If you just raise your hand and let me know if you have a question, and we'll allow time for Q&A afterwards as well. If you want more information, more tips, stuff like that, I put some of my cards over on the table that basically link over to my website where I dish out some articles and videos and stuff like that over at bengreenfieldfitness.com. So if you guys want to take those, feel free. Yes, question already. I didn't even start into the good stuff.
But are you going to be passing out like the information that you're presenting, or should we have brought something to take notes? Or
if you notes are recommended. I'll make the slide available. I'll upload it to my SlideShare page and make a link available for you guys. But you know, try to take a few notes if you can, if you want to. Sometimes my slides aren't super duper detailed, but it's up to you. There should be, there's a pen over there and stuff. Or you can just sit by somebody who has a photographic memory and it's all good. All right. Well, let's go ahead and start into 12 weeks before Ironman Coeur d'Alene, exactly what to do. First of all, congratulations on not fitting into the mold of the typical exercisers in America. You take the escalator. Love this photo. Exercise. Welcome to America. That drives me nuts. You always know the Ironman for athletes because you guys are the folks who are taking the stairs in the airport. That's always happening. Plus, you got the Ironman backpacks and all that good stuff. But congratulations on making that decision to go ahead and do something crazy like Ironman. How many in here have actually done an Ironman before? Oh, we got lots of newbies. How many in here are signed up for Ironman?
Grand Colombian Full Iron count?
Grand Colombian totally counts. Yeah, that's an Ironman. Yep, absolutely. And a few people just playing the support role. Support role, Sherpa. You're gonna have a long day on June 24th, if that is. Okay, so here we are. Basically, I believe this coming Monday, for those of you doing Ironman Coeur d'Alene, we're 12 weeks out. So mentally, when you're thinking about being 12 weeks out, realize that those final 3 to 4 weeks are a taper, where you're not going to be getting a lot fitter, where you're not going to be doing a lot of big epic workouts, where most of your long rides and your long runs are basically over. So at this point, you've got about 8 or 9 weeks of real solid training that you can do. So technically, it's not 12 weeks of hardcore training. It's about 8 or 9 weeks of hardcore training that you have left at this point. And that's why about 12 weeks out for an Ironman, for me, I start to get kind of serious, because 8 weeks is kind of the money time. And for most people, in terms of the folks that I've coached and you know, from professional athletes down to age grouper athletes, 8 weeks is about the period of time that you can really buckle down and do some hardcore training, put in some long weekends, and not go crazy, not go nuts and completely crack, whether physically or mentally. So that's why this is a really crucial point, because this is the time where you can commit and say, okay, from this point on, I'm going to start to really prioritize workouts and dig in. That's why this would be considered kind of the transition in most training plans, from your base period, where maybe you've been doing a lot of perhaps strength training, maybe a lot of indoor workouts, maybe a lot of kind of long, slow aerobic stuff. This is kind of the point where you start from your base training into your build training. Now, the differentiation between those two is that build incorporates intensity. It incorporates more race pace efforts. For Ironman specifically, it incorporates more efforts that are over and above race pace. During the build phase is when, and you'll see this as I go through the talk, when I'll do things like inject some strategically timed races. So I am forced to do some workouts that are going to push me even harder than I'll be pushing in Ironman. I start doing a lot of intervals. I start kind of getting ready to be in the pain cave, essentially. Whereas a lot of the workouts kind of leading up to being 12 weeks out maybe aren't quite as intensive or quite as race specific. But a build period, basically what that means is your workouts become more race specific. You start doing more intervals, harder workouts. And 8 weeks is generally a good period of time for you to be able to handle that before you start into your taper. This is why somewhere around 12 weeks out to about 9 weeks out, I look for an Olympic distance triathlon to do. If I can't find one, I head to the gym, or I set stuff up at home and I do a simulation. So what I mean by that is, like, I'll go to the gym and I'll time trial a 1,500 meter swim. And swimming hard, so I'm pretty tired when I get out of the water. And for me, like, if I'm doing a simulation and I work out at the YMCA, I'll go upstairs and hop on the bike and set up the odometer on the bike and do a 40K ride at a pretty tough pace, and then throw in a 10K run. If you can find an Olympic distance triathlon that kind of falls somewhere in that range, there are a few around here. You know, sometimes you gotta travel as well, depending on where you're at. For those of you doing Coeur d'Alene, you know, many of you might find that you need to do a simulation. But doing a hard simulation that kind of gets you into race mode, that forces you to get that transition mindset, about weeks 12 to 9 is a good time to do this. I don't really recommend that at this point you necessarily do like a half Ironman. Half Ironman works out a little bit better, closer to the race, as you'll see, and I'll talk about the best place to put in a half Ironman or a half Ironman race simulation if you're going to do that. But for weeks 12 through weeks 9, Olympic distance race or race simulation fits in really, really well to kind of jumpstart your build period, and also helps you to outline some of your weaknesses, some of the things you need to work on. Early season, you also get a chance to test out some of your equipment as well, which is important. By the way, if I can't get in an Olympic triathlon and I don't want to do a simulation, sometimes I'll also do a sprint triathlon and then like another hard workout later on the day after the sprint triathlon. But basically, we're just trying to get in the race mindset here, somewhere between weeks 12 through 9. Okay, so some of the specific things to focus on. Swimming, 12 weeks out, you want to either every week or every other week start testing your speed. For Ironman, I generally like to do this with about 500 to 1,000 meter tests. And what I mean by that is you would get in the water, you would warm up, and let's say you're going to do this every Monday or every other Monday, and you'll see how fast it takes you to swim a 1,000 meters as fast as you can. You could also do like a 2 to 3 by 500 meter. Just having these on the calendar helps a ton with your focus and your swim workouts the rest of the week. Doing swim time trials all year long kind of stinks because they're painful and you got to focus and you're just staring at that black line. I mean, if you're swimming a 1,000 time trial for 20 laps, it just kind of sucks. But for 8 weeks, I mean, even if you're just going to, or I'm sorry, for 12 weeks, for at least 8 of those weeks leading up to the taper period, if you can get in, you know, just a few time trials. I like to schedule them on a weekly basis. For me, it's typically on a Tuesday when I'm getting in the water and doing like a harder swim workout. And so that's typically my time trial day. But a good warm-up, a few drills, swim your time trial hard, and then cool down or do a little bit more in your set if you want to.
Instead I raise my hand, Ben.
Yeah, no, you're fine.
All right, 3 by 500s with a couple hundred warm-up.
Yeah, a couple hundred warm-up or some drills.
What about 3 by 500? Is 1,500? Is that too much?
That's not too much, no. I wouldn't time trial a lot more than 1,500 because if you get to the point where it turns into a volume workout, you're not going to mentally want to go hard enough. That's why I wouldn't even say like do a 2 by 1,000. Like most people are not going to swim that first 1,000 as a true time trial. Or if they do, they're going to be too mentally and physically smoked to do the second 1,000 as a true time trial. So 3 by 500 with a good recovery in between each would be okay.
2x500 is also fine. So, but time those, keep track of them, write them in your log, see how fast you are. Use those as your ammo to motivate you throughout the week. You know, when you're in the water doing drills, 50 or 100 meter repeats, it helps to have a little carrot on the end of the stick, knowing you're going to test at some point later on. So I begin my time trial test for swimming. I don't begin them until I'm about 12 weeks out from an A priority race. Bike, begin power sets. So how many of you have already been kind of sitting indoors on the indoor trainer, doing some long aerobic workouts? You get a lot of slow twitch muscle formed when you do that. And you get a pretty good dose of aerobic threshold training. But what I like to start to do at this point, even if I'm still riding inside, is start to throw in some power sets. So you're beginning to incorporate and neuromuscularly recruit fast twitch muscle. So what I mean by that is maybe you're taking that, you know, right now it's getting nice enough to ride. Like, did anybody else ride today? It's gorgeous, beautiful days of riding. But whether you're riding indoors or outdoors, you're starting to throw in some hard efforts, some hard fast twitch efforts. So let's say you're riding a course, and I actually haven't ridden the new course yet, the new Ironman Coeur d'Alene course, but it would mean that at every mile marker, you're going to stand up out of the saddle and you're going to do like a stomp workout, where you're standing up out of the saddle and stomping for 100 pedal strokes. Or if you're doing a 2-hour ride indoors, on minute 9 out of every 10 minutes, you're riding hard, like incorporating fast twitch muscle, getting yourself up to threshold. I call these power sets on the bike, but essentially they're not quite so intensive that they're like these long interval workouts, but you're kind of waking up the muscles, waking up your fast twitch muscles, starting to train your body's ability to buffer some lactic acid, starting to recruit some of that fast twitch muscle so you can generate more power and more strength on the bike. If I've been doing a lot of like indoor, you know, toss a movie in and kind of do a long, slow aerobic workout to get ready for Ironman, this is the point where I start either doing like spin interval based workouts or doing something that's a little bit more intensive and harder than just, you know, staring at the TV for 2 or 3 hours or something like that. So this is the point where you start to focus on fast twitch muscle a little bit more. Running, begin your track intervals at this point. Yes, sir.
On the bike, you know when they're going to clear, you know, Micah Hill and the course
Yeah,
for
I don't.
gravel and stuff?
I don't. That'd be a question to ask.
Probably won't be for a while.
What's his face?
I know somebody who
Yeah,
wrote
Matt.
it the other day, said one time.
Was that right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah. I
riding
don't know.
on the side or in the lane? You know.
Well, on the side, she wrote it on her bike, so.
Do you know somebody who wrote it
Yeah.
for the course today?
All the way
The
down.
other day.
Yeah.
We're riding it tomorrow, but.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm personally not sure, and I'm not teaching an Ironman Coeur d'Alene camp
She
this
said
year.
it
like
had
we
been
usually do.
swept once,
Oh,
and then, of course, we had the snow, so I thought there might be gravel on it.
right.
Yeah.
I talked to her today, this afternoon, she seemed to be
Yeah.
okay.
Today I did 40 miles over on the Washington side today, and everything was swept. So I don't know if you guys are the same over here or if Idaho lags behind, but we were fine over there. So
You continue to do up to 2 hours on the bike at this point with the power sets in there, and that's about as far as you go is 2 hours or a 40-mile ride?
no, I don't necessarily do 2 hours. At this point, for being 12 weeks out, I'd want to be closer to right around like 3.5 hours for Ironman. But I also, you know, in the style of training that I recommend, you're not going to be doing a ton of 4 and 5 hour rides in those final 8 weeks anyways. So, you know, kind of like more of a mid-distance range. But about the longest I'd top out, like incorporating like intervals and really fast twitch stuff, would be 3 hours. And once you're pushing a lot longer than that, you generally want to keep it relatively aerobic.
But we
So-
still have, excuse me, we have till September, so we still have 5.5 months. So 12
Yeah.
weeks for us is going to be
Yeah.
June.
You got some time. Yeah.
So we'll be looking for this then.
Yeah.
Right
exactly.
now, we're in aerobic slow. I went out and ran 9 today. and-
Exactly. Yeah. You don't need to be starting into the hard stuff.
Exactly.
Whereas everybody else in here is kind of looking into Sufferfest starting here pretty soon. So as I was saying, the run, if you like to do track workouts, and I personally hate to do them. I do my track repeats like out the trails and the hills and just time them, just because I hate running around in a circle. Or you could use a treadmill. But either way, you're going to start intervals. Intervals are going to range, typical track workout or track workout length is going to be anywhere from like 400 to 1200 meter intervals, anywhere from 1 minute long up to 4 minutes long. But you're starting to really train your turnover, train your fast twitch muscle, begin to have at least one workout a week for your runs where it's not long, slow aerobic stuff, it's not skill work or cadence work or anything like that. I mean, it's really more of kind of like a pain cave style track workout. If you can get in 8 weeks of track workouts or the equivalent of something like a track workout going into Ironman, it's going to make you a lot faster. And that can even be up to, if you wanted to go up to like a mile repeat on the road, that'd be fine. The way that I like to do it is I generally start with shorter track workouts or shorter, equivalent of like a 400 meter, and then I'll get those longer every week. So by the time I'm getting about 4 weeks out from Ironman, I'm doing mile-long repeats. But early in the season, I start them shorter. Some folks will say, do your repeats and do a longer repeat at a slower pace, and then as you get closer and closer to Ironman, make them shorter and shorter at a faster pace. But I personally like to start the opposite way. I'll do like short repeats at an intense pace and try and maintain that intensity, just make it longer every week. So for 8 weeks in a row, you've got at least one workout where you're doing intervals, you're trying to make them longer, a little bit more intense every week. So pretty straightforward on the run, but just, you're starting at intervals. It's kind of a similar concept as the bike. We're starting to incorporate fast twitch muscle. And then for fuel, it kind of depends on the time of year that you're doing Ironman, but for me, when I'm doing something like Coeur d'Alene, usually you come out the back end of the holidays, and a lot of us don't eat super clean over the holidays. In the winter, just because we're mammals anyways, we tend to put on a little more weight, maybe eat calories, eat a little bit more fat in the winter. But generally, some of the things I try and start to clean up about 12 weeks out would be things like, alcohol consumption, any type of fast food, processed foods, anything that is going to end up having me having to fight weight at this point. The last thing you want to do is be going into your last 8 to 12 weeks and be trying to shed significant amounts of weight. So about 12 weeks out, I begin to start to eat clean. For me personally, that also means I'm cutting out gluten, soy, dairy. I just find that even if I'm not allergic, or even if the folks that I work with aren't intolerant or allergic to those type of foods, you just feel better and you can shed fat faster when you're cutting those out of your diet. So this is about the point where I start to focus on really kind of eating a little more like a monk. Vegetables, healthy fats, healthy proteins, real recognizable food. So this is just about the point where you begin to eat clean. And different people do well on different ratios of carbohydrates to fats to proteins, but you begin to at least start to think about that stuff at this point. So that kind of brings us from week 12 down to week 9. We've done Olympic distance triathlon. We've started into our build period. So now we're about 8 weeks out. And really that means we're like 4 or 5 weeks out from our taper. Yeah.
I'm sorry, can we go back just a little bit?
Yes.
You said you only swim on Tuesdays, or how
No,
often
that's
you should
the day that I test.
Okay.
So I personally swim about 3 days a week.
So
Typically.
for me, and I'm sure for a lot of people, swimming is kind of their hardest thing,
Uh-huh.
especially how cold that water is.
Right.
Should you
You mean the open water?
it was freezing cold last year.
Oh, yeah.
52
yeah.
degrees.
Yeah.
Should you spend more time obviously working on what's not your best, or should you do even all three, or
In terms of how you set up your swim workouts throughout the week?
just swim, bike, and run?
Right.
If I'm really good on bike but I'm really bad on swimming, should I swim more, or should I make sure I'm doing all three evenly?
Yeah, it's a
throughout
good
the
question. So it's basically an issue of identifying your limiters. And certainly you want to figure out where your limiters are, whether it be a limiter for a particular sport or a limiter for a particular fitness aspect of that sport. So maybe you can
Right.
swim for a long period of time, but you're not very fast.
Right.
So you'd want to do shorter, faster swim repeats. You will get faster if you're not a good swimmer by swimming as much as possible, by getting in the water 5 or 6 days a week. And that's really hard to do. I personally just started doing that a couple months ago because I'm going to be trying to go pro this year, and I just need to get faster in the water. But it can kind of, especially during the winter, it can be tough to go get in the pool every single day and swim. But I'm doing that because that's my limiter. So I want to get to be a faster swimmer. Similar thing. I mean, it's going to vary from person to person, really. So, all right. I mentioned the half Ironman. You look at a guy like Craig Alexander. Really, a lot of the pros these days are throwing in a half Ironman somewhere about 5 to 8 weeks out. It's just a perfect time. It's long enough to where you're not going to lose any fitness throwing in a half Ironman around that point. It can be, again, similar to the Olympic distance race simulation that I described. It can be a half Iron distance race simulation if you really can't find or can't get into, or you don't want to pay however much it costs now to do a 70.3 or whatever. Either way, though, about weeks 8 through weeks 5, you should be looking for a half Ironman to do, or something along those lines, something along that level. It's a really, really good place, good time period to put in a half. This also means that for the swim, you either begin swimming open water, preferably around 8 weeks out. And if you live in Idaho and you're doing Ironman Coeur d'Alene, unless it's unseasonably warm, you're generally starting to do some open water skill sets. What do I mean by that? For example, one thing that I'll do is I'll start sighting, practicing sighting. So I'll do something like a 500 meter repeat, and every 3 to 5 strokes I'll be looking out of the water. And for me, I'll usually try and see what time it is on the clock, or look at something else that I can just take my eyes out of the water, focus, see, and then head back in. So you're actually practicing sighting. Another thing that I'll do is I'll finish up a workout with some sprints with my head out of the water. Again, that's a little bit similar to some of the type of swimming you'll experience when you're in the open water. A lot of times what I'll do is a drill where I'm swimming freestyle, and then I roll onto my back for a couple strokes and then roll back around and keep swimming freestyle. Basically just trying to change things up in terms of your breathing patterns, your stroke patterns, your sighting patterns. Another really cool drill that works well for open water, especially for Coeur d'Alene, because we've got the double lap where you get out, is you swim. You can write this down if you want to. It's a 10 by 150 workout where you swim 10 by 150, but after each 150 you get out of the water and you walk around to the other end of the pool, and then you keep going. So I'll do that type of stuff too to simulate like open water, getting in and out of the water, maybe coming up and treading water around the buoys. I'll actually get out of the pool in between sets and do things like jumping jacks or push-ups, or just some things that kind of shake it up a little bit. Those type of workouts I'll start doing about 8 weeks out from the actual race. Things that take me outside of my comfort zone and just get me used to having that change in the flow of blood. That can a lot of times happen when you're doing an open water swim race, or getting up like you are at Coeur d'Alene and running on the beach and then getting back in. So you're starting to think about the fact that you're going to be racing in open water in 8 weeks, and you want to start to get your body ready for something like that. Whether or not you want to swim in your wetsuit in the pool is up to you. It's not too bad on the rower as long as you rinse it in the shower afterwards. It's not that big of a deal if you want to go for a swim in your wetsuit in the pool just to see how it feels and make sure the stuff fits and whatnot. For the bike, from weeks 8 through week 5, big rides, 1 to 2 of them. And when I say big, yes.
One question on the swing before I get to the bike.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be so cold, especially for
Right.
people that are, small frame and so forth. It really gets cold, hands and feet. It's legal to wear footy things, whatever you call them.
Yeah, in most cases, I mean, they'll announce it if it's not. If you're not able to wear booties, usually you can't wear gloves just because they have like a little webbing on them.
Right.
They speed you up a little bit, but I mean, booties and the neoprene cap are generally going to be just fine.
So it probably is a good idea for people that go to bed at night with their socks on.
Yeah, I mean, like the whole deal with the cold water is you can train yourself. Basically, you can not only train your mammalian dive reflex to get a little bit less finicky on you when you first get exposed to the cold water, but you can also just train yourself to be more mentally and physically adapted to the cold. I talked about this on the podcast last week, actually, but I mean, you can do things like take cold showers and take cold baths and just expose your body to cold so that it's more ready for that and less shocked by it when you do get in. But, I mean, yeah.
But they do help, right?
What's that, the booties?
Yeah.
A little bit. I mean, if it was like it was last year, like, what was it, 52, is that what you said?
They claimed it was 58, but it was
I mean, you
52.
can use like Crisco, for example, as an insulator. So a lot of like the pole swimmers will do. on your hands, on your feet, something like that will work as well. So that's just a little harsh on the wetsuit. It's an option. So
They've been legal.
my wife's first
They've
triathlon,
been legal.
the booties have been legal. Yeah. My wife didn't have a wetsuit for her first triathlon, and it was in Coeur d'Alene, and she just wore a swimsuit and like smeared her whole body in Crisco. And she still had Crisco coming off the bike. But she wasn't cold. So, good question. So bike, at this point, I like to see between weeks 8 and weeks 5. And one good place to put these, if you're going to do a half Ironman, is like sandwiched on either side of the half Ironman. So like, week 6 you do a half Ironman, and then week 7 and week 5 are your big ride weeks. But I like to see something right around a century for a big ride week, and that can be 90 to 110, just somewhere around that range. You don't have to go the full 120. Couple things about the big rides. First of all, zone 3 would be your money zone for those rides, and that is your maximum fat burning zone. For those of you who have done heart rate testing or trained with heart rate zones, you probably know what your zone 3 is. For those of you who haven't, it's super easy to find out what your maximum fat burning zone or what your money zone would be for the bike during Ironman. The way that you do it is you do a 20 to 30 minute time trial. Or if you're doing an Olympic distance triathlon, you could just look at your heart rate on the bike during an Olympic distance triathlon. That'll also be somewhat similar. But the way that it works is you warm up pretty well, and then you ride at your maximum sustainable pace for 20 to 30 minutes. This would be the pace at which your legs aren't getting rubbery, you're not slowing down, your cadence isn't getting slower, but it's pretty tough. It's about 8.5 on a scale of 1 to 10. So ideally, if you've warmed up well, your heart rate should be fairly level throughout. It shouldn't climb and climb and climb throughout. But it's basically a time trial, a sustained pace. And your heart rate at that sustained pace you need to take. You need to find out what your average heart rate is during that 20 to 30 minute time trial. And then all you do is you subtract about 20 beats from that heart rate. So for me, for example, if I time trial on my bike, I'm right around 162-ish, somewhere right around in there. So if I subtract 20 from that, I'm at 142. And I try and keep myself right around in the range of 142 during my long, slow bike rides. So when you subtract 20 from your threshold heart rate, that's pretty close to what your maximum fat burning zone is, or what's called your aerobic threshold. Really, really good way to find it, and it works really well. As boring as it may sound, you're trying to stay, relatively close to that zone. If you can add 3 beats to that and subtract 3 beats to that. So for me at 142, it'd be 139 to 145. I can plug that in my watch, and my watch beep when I drop below 139 or go above 145, and just roll with that. Hills, downhills, flats, etc. for an Ironman ride or for a long training ride. It works really well. Yes.
Can you focus on your cadence, maybe holding to 100 or 110 or whatever, instead of looking at your heartbeat?
What do you mean by that? You mean like use cadence as a parameter instead of?
Yeah.
Not really. I mean, like for me, the heart rate system that I use, I can see cadence and heart rate because I use a bike computer that tells me my heart rate. But cadence is going to be not necessarily a predictor of intensity or correlated with intensity in a lot of cases. I mean, you might have somebody who's riding at a cadence of 100 and their heart rate's 180, and somebody else is riding at a cadence of 100 and they're at 120 for their heart rate. So Ironman cadence is generally, for most people, going to be somewhere between 80 and 90. You're usually not spinning up much above that. So for these big rides, you don't have to do this for all your rides, because frankly it's just a heck of a lot of sugar and fuel you dump into your body if you're doing it for every ride. If you're trying to fuel just like in the race for every ride. But for those long rides, for those couple long rides, I like to fuel the way I'm going to fuel in the race. Grab whatever you plan on using in the race, whatever gels, whatever drinks, whatever bars, whatever pills, whatever capsules, whatever. And you use those during those long training rides during weeks 5 through weeks 8. As far as whether or not those should be bricks, I don't really recommend that they be bricks in the strict sense of the word, meaning that you are doing a 100-mile ride and you're like running 10 miles or something like that. That's really stressful on the body. And in my opinion, the cons outweigh the pros in terms of how long it's going to take you to recover from, You're not going to be working out well again for like 4 or 5 days after you do something like that. Use your half Ironman where you've got a shorter, more intense bike ride and then a fairly decent mid-distance run after that half Ironman as like a real key brick in your training, but don't throw in a huge run after a long ride. If you want to though, 10, 15 minutes just to kind of get your legs used to running after that long on the bike, that's fine, that's not that stressful. But don't throw in an epic run after an epic bike. It's just you aren't going to get a ton of benefit compared to how many days you lose and how long it takes to recover from. Yes?
But if you keep your brick exercises smaller,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
then
that's...
use them weekly
I'm
or
a huge
weekends?
fan. Like I'm training for Wildflower right now, and like last night's workout was 4 by 3 mile bike efforts, and each 3 mile bike effort had a 1 mile run after it. I love those kind of short bricks because you get a ton of practice running off the bike. You're back and forth. You can keep your intensity up a little bit, but it's not epic. It's not like I'm going out, for like even a half Ironman, I'm not going out and riding 2 hours and running in an hour. So you can get a lot more work done in a shorter period of time, like mini bricks or shorter bricks. So I prefer those type of workouts for the brick workouts. Whereas like long ride, nothing but just like a short run after a long ride.
Roughly how many calories do you consume in the 112 miles?
For Ironman, I do about 400 to 450.
That's it?
Per hour.
Calories
Oh,
per
per
hour.
hour.
Yeah, calories per hour.
Okay.
Lab values kind of start you off right around close to 250. And so that's where I recommend you start. But if you ride for 4 hours at 250 calories per hour and you feel like you don't have a lot of energy when you finish, you're going to want to up it. I mean, I've just found through experimentation and just continually putting it up until I start to get gastric distress that about 400 to 450 calories an hour is what I can take in during Ironman. For me, that's a gel at 20 minutes, a gel at 40 minutes, a gel at 60 minutes, and then some solid food at the end of each hour, whether it be like a bar or some chomps or some gummies or something like that. And then I'm just doing water. And that's pretty much my nutrition the whole time during Ironman. No special sports drinks or anything like that.
Okay, so 8 to 5 weeks out, you don't start doing bricks until then?
No, I mean nothing intensive. I mean, that I'll certainly every once in a while just for fun throw in a brick during my winter training. But I mean, really in terms of like focusing on making sure that I'm getting bricks in on a consistent basis, about 8 weeks out is where I really start to focus on those.
And they're short for you. I mean, like for
For
example.
me, they're short. They're like
one of-
mini bricks.
One of the things that I've done in the past with super bricks, like you were saying, we'll go out on a pretty good solid ride for
Right.
half an hour, 20 minutes or so, and then jump off and run for a mile or so,
Yeah.
and just do that.
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
3 times.
Like short bricks, you get a ton of benefit out of those, and you aren't sitting around trying to recover for 4 or 5 days. So yeah. And then the run, the long run works pretty well either the week before or the week after your half. So for example, if you're doing a half Ironman at week 5, you could do your long run on week 6 or your long run. But the closest I ever like to get the long run to the race is 4 weeks out, just because those take so long to recover from. And when I say long run, I'm talking about that last long run that you do that for most people getting ready for Ironman is like 18 to 22 miles. I generally like to push that as far out as I comfortably can from the race, just because it takes so much to recover from, and it's incredibly tough on the body. So it generally falls into this time period. If it has to, I'll do it in week 4, but generally I'll have it like week 5, week 6. Yeah.
So it's not a good idea to do a marathon during this time?
Mm-mm.
Not at all.
No, not. I mean, like let's say
marathon-
you've got a
marathon
friend who
racing.
runs a lot slower than you, and you're going to pace them, and it's not pushing you that much. I mean, maybe, but it's just so hard to recover from those during this period of time. I mean, again, one part of this is what makes you happy. I mean, if you want to do a marathon in your build-up, that's cool. I mean, if you want to do it. But as far as like leading up to an optimal Ironman, it's not really recommended.
Because they've got the marathon, correlated marathon in May.
Yeah.
End of May.
Yeah, I mean, if I were going to use the correlated marathon end of May, I'd run up to about 20 and then just stop, or I mean, if you want to, grab some food and walk it out. But I definitely wouldn't run the whole thing. So, yeah. Fueling, just like in the bike, we're going to fuel exactly as in the race. In your long run, especially those last 1 or 2 runs, let's say you've got a 16 to 18 miler, and then your last long run is an 18 to 20 miler, you do want to fuel the way that you plan on fueling during the race. The exception for me for that is that I like to do Coca-Cola during the last half marathon of the Ironman marathon. And I just generally find it very logistically difficult to run with like a liter of Coke under my arm. So I just go gels the whole time. But you give your body the type of sugar it's going to be forced to digest and have to deal with during a long run in your long run practice. So try and use that as a way to train your stomach during that last long run. And then fuel, just the main notes on fuel are the bike and the run notes that I mentioned. During weeks 8 through week 5, you are practicing what you're going to be using during the race. At least a couple of those long bikes and at least one of those long runs. Okay, so 4 weeks out. If you're a super high volume athlete, and I would consider that to be like 25 plus hours per week, you would start your taper. Meaning that you would begin that reduction in volume and start to lay off. If you're training under 25 hours a week and you start tapering 4 weeks out, you just don't have enough fitness in your body. You don't have enough volume in your body to be able to do that and not lose fitness by the time the race rolls around. Any training plans that you see having 4-week tapers, those are kind of trickle down training plans from like professional triathletes who are doing 30, 35, 40 hours a week and who have the fitness and the volume in their bodies to be able to take that amount of time off before the race. So generally 4 weeks out for me is very similar to the 8 weeks out, to the 5 weeks out that I just showed you. I mean, you're still doing some of your long stuff. If anything, that might be the last week that you do a long run or a long bike. But in most cases, unless you're super high volume, you're not going to be starting your taper at this point. But when I'm talking about the taper, here's basically what that means. You reduce your volume by 40 to 60%. If you're a high volume athlete, that's 4 weeks out. If you're training under 25 hours a week, you'd start that about 3 weeks out. So you look at your training logs or the number of hours that you spent training per week. For me, I just keep track of hours, and you figure out how to cut that basically about in half, which is kind of hard to do. And at that point, you're kind of like a rat on a wheel, and you're starting to cut off all those cannabinoids and dopamine and serotonin and everything else you're releasing from all that exercise. This is when you start to get grumpy because you're not getting training as much as you wanted to. Your family doesn't want to be around you or whatever. But taper means reduction volume by about 40 to 60%. And when you begin your taper, you want to maintain your frequency and your intensity. And when I say you want to maintain your frequency, what I mean by that is if you're used to, let's say on a Monday and a Tuesday, doing a swim on a Monday morning, run Monday early evening, lifting weights Tuesday morning, and maybe a bike ride Tuesday afternoon. Let's say your training scenario looks like that. You do all that just the same, but you cut every single one of those workouts in half. So if each of those workouts were taking you 50, 60 minutes to do, all of a sudden they're cut down to 25, 30-minute workouts. So that's what I mean by maintain your frequency but reduce your volume. Intensity is going to be the same or else go slightly up. And that's one of the tricks that you're using, because even though you're decreasing how much you train, by maintaining or slightly increasing your intensity, you keep a lot of fitness in your body and you start to get your body ready to race and be in that race mode for as long as it's got to be on race day. Swim, really, still around here, it may be tough to get in the open water, but you're going to want to think about the open water skills. Even if you've got to go over to a shallower lake, like over to Liberty Lake, that's going to be about this time, about 4 weeks out, you should be able to get in something like Liberty Lake relatively comfortably and stay out there for at least 30, 40 minutes in your wetsuit. You want to start to really think about getting open water swimming in at least once a week. Just getting comfortable in your wetsuit, getting a little bit of that cold adaptation in, and doing open water swimming. 4 weeks out is a good week for a slightly longer brick if you haven't started your taper at 4 weeks out. The longest I would ever run off the bike is 59 minutes. I never run more than an hour off the bike if I'm doing a big, long brick like we were talking about. So what I would mean by that, long brick for me would be I'm going out, I'm doing a 60, 70 mile ride, and then a 45-minute run off the ride. That's a long brick. And that would be the type of thing that fit in fairly well at the end of week 4, as long as that's not your taper week. Okay, I wrote 60 here. But don't go any longer than an hour off of a long bike. I just don't recommend that you do it. And then as far as fueling goes, if you've been focusing on caloric restriction can depress your immune system a little bit. It can make it tougher to get high quality workouts in. It can be tough on the body. It can cause a little bit of an increase in cortisol. If you're trying to lose weight, just completely forget about it once you're 4 weeks out, because the last thing that you want to do is be getting sick 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out, putting a lot of stress on your body. So any focus that you have on weight loss at this point should be done, and just start to think about fueling your body very, very well, taking care of your body, and not focusing on any weight loss once you're 4 weeks out. There's just the risks outweigh the benefits. Okay, as I mentioned, when we're 3 weeks out from Ironman, this is when the taper is going to begin for anybody who's training less than 25 hours a week, which is going to be most people with real jobs and lives. So this week would be your the long brick week, and the previous week would be the long bike, long run week. That's right. Let me clarify real quick, because I know that looks confusing compared to the previous slide. What I meant by that was, if you are how many people in here are planning on a 3-week taper? You're training less than 25 hours a week. You're going to be like a high volume athlete. Okay. So for you, write this down to your notes. This will help clarify. Week 4 weeks out from Ironman. If you're a lower volume athlete, that would be the week where, if you're going to do your last long bike and your last long run, that's the week that you would actually do that. Okay. So that's the week where, for example, you might have a long bike ride, and this is a good way to set it up. Long bike ride on Saturday, mid-morning, mid-afternoon, long run Sunday morning when you're running on fatigued legs. Okay? And then at the end of week 3, and I know this is confusing how I set it up on these 2 slides. I think I was confusing myself as I wrote it. At the end of week 3 is your long brick week. And when I say long brick, I'm referring to that brick I was talking about before, where you're riding 60, 70, 80 miles and then running, an hour or so off of the bike. Okay, so the end of week 4, long bike Saturday, long run Sunday. The end of week 3, long brick. Okay, hopefully that clarifies things. It was kind of tough here for me because I was trying to write it out, addressing 2 different folks, the high volume folks and the lower volume folks. But that's basically what it would look like for just about everybody sitting in this room. 3 weeks out, you've got your long bike and long run. Or your long break. Okay, swim. 3 weeks out is when I start doing short, choppy swim sets. Okay, lots of 25s, lots of 50s, some 100s, but not doing a lot of like 500s, 800s, 1000s, hour-long steady swims. Start doing lots of short, choppy stuff. So you're increasing your turnover. You're training some of those muscles you're going to be using when you're doing open water swimming, trying to get your cadence up. But this is a good time to start working on those faster swim repeats in the water. Okay, at the end of 3 weeks out, you're basically 14 days out from the race. At that point, if you're planning on using caffeinated gels or using what's really a great sports performance aid, caffeine, on race day, and you want to get the most benefit out of it, start to switch to decaf at this point. If you drink coffee in the morning, or start to get, yerba mate, energy drinks, caffeinated gels, stuff like that out. So 14 days out from the race, you're going to get the biggest benefit if you start to cut caffeine then. Most research that shows benefits from using caffeine as an ergogenic aid start 14 to 17 days out. So about the end of week 3 is when you cut caffeine. So probably the most confusing slide I've done yet based on that. But does everybody kind of understand now?
But during the race, you use your caffeine.
During the race, absolutely, yeah. That's a good question, because I don't use all caffeinated gels, because you're just jittered out by the time you're 4 or 5 hours into the race. I alternate between a caffeinated gel and an uncaffeinated gel. and that means you're going to have to memorize. Actually, I think they're probably going to have goos on the course now instead of power bar gels. It may depend, but you'll have to kind of check and see which flavors are non-caffeinated so that you're not dumping way more caffeine than you're used to in your stomach, because that can lead to like diarrhea and have a diuretic effect and just kind of leave you feeling not too hot. Okay, so 2 weeks out, I start doing some real short, choppy stuff. These would be like 100 to 200 meter efforts on the run, like short half-mile, mile-long repeats on the bike, continue those 25s, 50s, 100s on the swim. But basically that entire week, when you're 2 weeks out, you almost feel like you're training for a sprint distance or an Olympic distance triathlon. Okay, so you're doing very little aerobic work. It's just all fast, short, choppy stuff. Okay, that's enough to keep you fit. If you were doing that 8 weeks out, you'd lose too much of your aerobic capacity. You'd lose too much of your cardiovascular fitness. But starting that 2 weeks out, it makes you really, really sharp come race day. And it allows you to have that reduction in volume, because you're still working out at only 40 to 60% of what you were doing before. But it allows you to reduce your volume that much, but still stay fit, because you're going hard. And those hard efforts keep you fit. If you were doing real short 40 to 60% of what you were doing before, but everything was easy aerobic, you'd have a detraining effect. You would be as fit come race day. So the swim, like I said, continues 25s or 50s. I like to do some timed 100s just to kind of keep me motivated and see how fast I'm swimming 100s. So that means I'm not doing my 500s or my 1000s at this point. Bike, no epic rides at this point, okay? Resist the urge to join your friends who are heading out to do, the full course. Not a good idea at this point. So don't go out and do any epic rides. I see a lot of people doing those 2 weeks out, and it's not a good idea. You do some hard tempo intervals, and kind of towards the end of this week, bike shops are going to start to get really busy towards the end of this week. But at some point during this week, if you're a wrench, go in and do a full equipment check on your bike. If not, get it into a bike shop and just get the cables tightened. Put it through the once over. So get the bike looked at during this week. Run, again, same thing, no long runs. At this point, up until about 14 days out from the race, I'm running just as often as I was before. Because running is the hardest on your body of the 3 disciplines that you're doing, I start to even decrease my run frequency at this point. So if you're running 4 days a week, you might bump that down to 3 days a week. So you're giving your body just a little bit of extra recovery from the hardest skill, running. And then fuel, end of the week. What I do is I carb deplete. So this means that if the race is on Sunday, on either Saturday or Sunday, depending on what my family's up to and when I can get a nice solid workout in on a Saturday or Sunday morning, I'll do a workout that's somewhat carbohydrate depleting, meaning that I'll go out and I'll do a good 1.5 to 2 hour workout, but not really eat anything during the workout. And starting from that point, I'll begin to eat a relatively low carbohydrate diet for a couple of days. So what I'm trying to do is set my body up so that it really is going to absorb like a sponge the rest of the carbohydrates that I eat the rest of the week. So that last weekend, before Ironman weekend, you're basically just kind of thinking like Atkins, think a little low carb. Basically, you're not doing a lot of pastas, rices, potatoes, things like that. During your rides, you're not doing a lot of gels, sports drinks. You're essentially depleting your body just a little bit of carbohydrate. And you will have a little bit of a blah feeling as you're doing that, but it doesn't matter because you're not doing any epic workouts anyways. So this helps later on in the week as you absorb carbohydrates. So some people will not do any carbohydrate loading until the day before the race. I've personally found, with the athletes that I work with, I've found you get better results when you go low carbohydrate the week before and then gradually increase your carbs as the week goes on. And I'll show you how we do that as we go through these last 7 days. So 7 days before Ironman, short grip. This is that same like 1.5 to 2 hour workout that I mentioned that I'll do without any fuel, just to kind of carb deplete my body. So like on a Saturday or a Sunday, that's like an hour long ride with a half hour run afterwards. And you're not eating gels or drinking sports drinks during that time. It's just you wake up in the morning and you get some water and you go. Look at your schedule and try to plan it out so you can swim every day during race week. with the only exception being that a couple days before the race, 2 days before the race, so like on a Friday for a Sunday race, that's typically a rest day. That's the best day to rest, is 48 hours out. But try and swim every day that week, because swimming is such a feel for the water type of sport. You're going to feel a lot more comfortable in the water on race day if you can swim every day during race week. That can be in the lake or in your pool. Really limit your exposure to like sneezing kids, daycare. This is the time when you start to become the spoiled brat that's got Ironman that week. Just start to think about being in crowded public places with people coughing and sneezing on you. You know, I'm careful. I start to use oil of oregano, which is something that I use when like traveling on airplanes and stuff like that. I put a few drops in my mouth. I'll start to use that just every day, just to try and keep any germs and pathogens at bay. I start to use a foam roller every day, 7 days out. Full body foam roller session. It's cheaper than getting a massage every day. That last week before the race, and it really helps with muscle tightness, helps to remove a lot of adhesions. You'll feel a lot better, especially when you get off the bike and start into the marathon on race day, if you can grab a foam roller and do some foam rolling. You know, like on my YouTube channel, I show you how to foam roll every single body part. And that'd be a good place to start if you just go there and do a search for foam or do a search for roller. And then, as I mentioned, after you do your carb depleting workout 7 days before Ironman, you're mostly just kind of eating low carb at that point, about 40 to 50% carbohydrate intake. Okay, 6 days before. And then now we're going to get super specific. 6 days before, we're looking at Monday. Easy swim with a few brief hard efforts. Ideally, that swim is open water. And an easy bike with a few brief hard efforts. Generally, I'm not doing a run on that day because I've done a little bit of a break over the weekend. I want to choose the two skills that are going to allow my body to recover the easiest. So, easy swim, easy bike. When I say a few short hard efforts, I mean you're going for a 30-minute bike ride and you're throwing in like 3 or 4 1 to 2 minute hard efforts. Or for the swim, you're going for an easy 20-minute swim and you're throwing in a handful of like short 30 to 60 second kind of bursts up to race pace, that type of thing. So just some super short efforts during an easy workout. And you're continuing with a fairly low carbohydrate diet, 6 days out. And then the next day, 5 days out, not only do you start to increase carbs, but this day, this would be Tuesday, we're swimming again. Like I mentioned, you're going to swim basically almost every day. Easy swim with a few short hard efforts, an easy run with a few short hard efforts. When I say easy run, 20, 25-minute run, again, like a handful of 30 to 60 second stride outs on the run, just to wake up the muscles. So all of these days, other than the workouts, mostly it's just some stretching, some foam rolling, staying off the feet. Again, trying to block out the image of everybody else who's out there, doing 2-hour workouts, that type of thing. Just take good care of your body during this last week. It works really well. 4 days before Ironman, swimming again. No surprise there. Easy swim with a few brief hard efforts, easy bike with a few brief hard efforts. Pretty much identical to Monday, this Wednesday is, except your carb intake is even higher now. Okay, now you're bumping up to 60, 70% carbs. 3 days out. So now we are on Thursday, very similar to Tuesday. Swim and run. The only thing that happens is the carbs go up again. So, all these days it's just torturous because you're not working out very much. It's really, really straightforward. And you're just like waiting for race day. This is where you start to get nervous because you're not able to get rid of that nervous energy and you get kind of pent up. Expo starts to roll around. This is about the point where it's tempting to get on your feet all day, you go stand around the tents at the expo and look at everything, but roll in, roll out, get off your feet. Somebody push you through there in a wheelchair if necessary, but try and limit time on your feet. Fairly high carbohydrate diet at this point, which again makes people nervous about gaining weight, and you're eating rice and potatoes. When I go high carbohydrate, I still don't do gluten. Like I mentioned earlier, I start to eat clean 12 weeks out. I'm still just doing like rice and potato-based starches, some quinoa, stuff like that. Yeah.
Sweet potatoes versus yams.
Yams for me, I feel like they're higher in fiber. I don't think that they're significantly higher in fiber, but I like to go closer to the sweet potatoes because during race week, I'm not doing a ton of salads, a ton of fruits, a ton of fibrous foods, just because it tends to kind of collect in your gut. So I like a sweet potato or a baked potato as a carb choice. Like when I'm racing Ironman Hawaii, I've got this restaurant, I just go get white rice every day. I mean, it's just clean. It's just
White rice?
pure carbs. Yeah,
White rice.
yeah, just white rice. Yeah. It's cheap. It's $2. So yeah. Okay, 2 days before Ironman, like I mentioned, rest day. Again, kind of torturous because you're also eating a bunch of carbs. But you're off. I schedule a massage. It's going to be on this day. You're staying off your feet. This is the day to kind of study the course, study all your notes from today, your race strategy. 70 to 80% carb diet. Now we're on a Friday. Then the day before the race. This is my ritual. This is the way I have all the athletes that I work with do it. Morning brick on an empty stomach. So you're going out. Generally, I end with the swim on this one because the water is still cold. It's kind of nice. Gives you a little bit of recovery. But an easy bike, a 30-minute bike or so, about a 15-minute run, and then you hop in the water and 5 to 10 minutes of easy swimming. Okay, that's in the morning. Generally on an empty stomach, because if you do it on an empty stomach, then you go have breakfast, you're going to suck up a lot more of those carbs. And then breakfast is the biggest meal of the day. A lot of sweet potatoes, maybe some oatmeal, that type of thing. But high carb breakfast because most of the rest of the day you're not going to want to eat a ton of food. You're just kind of snacking a little bit as you're hungry. As far as dinner goes, I don't know if I wrote this on the slide for 2 days out, but we generally have the pasta party on this day. I eat before I go to the pasta party because the food there is kind of crappy and never does too well in your stomach. So I eat before I go. I still socialize with people and sit there and listen to the race director and everything, but I do eat before I go to the pasta party. I know that you paid $600 for the pasta party, but oh well. High carb meal after that morning brick the day before. After that brick, I just stretch a lot, stay off the feet, try and keep the feet elevated. And then dinner is pretty straightforward. I do an easy to digest protein, a little bit of steak without too much fat in it, just because it's got a long gut transit time. Like some salmon, something like that, a bit of tuna. Again, an easy to digest, clean carbohydrate, sweet potato, rice, quinoa, something like that. And just a little bit of an iron-rich dark leafy green on the side, like bok choy, spinach, broccoli, something along those lines. Not too much, because you don't want too much fiber. Don't eat until you're blue in the face. Generally, breakfast that day is the meal that you're going to eat the most of. You're really just going to eat until you're completely full. But dinner, you don't need to eat much. Generally, if you eat a big dinner, you just don't feel that well on race morning. So that's dinner. 80 to 85% carb diet that day, the day before Ironman. And then Ironman, where you're smart, ingenuity. Don't just get a leg up on the competition, get them both up. Okay, race morning breakfast, super straightforward. Not too many fats, not too many proteins, just carbs. That can be white rice, it can be sweet potato, it can be baked potato. If you like oatmeal and that's too much, not too much fiber for you, it can be oatmeal. Things you want to stay away from would be like scrambled eggs, big fruit smoothies full of fiber, that type of stuff. So generally just a pretty straight, clean carbohydrate breakfast. And again, for me, I go with the rice starch or potato-based starch. Fluids, the equivalent of about a bottle of water from breakfast, which should be about 2 to 3 hours prior to Ironman. About a bottle of water from that point on up to the event. Equipment check right when you show up. So you're not racing around 5 minutes before the swim, trying to fix a rubber brake pad or something like that. And a warm-up sequence for Ironman is pretty straightforward. You're not getting to warm up on your bike, so it's just usually a quick jog to kind of loosen up the bowels. I usually stretch while I'm in line at the porta potty. I also put my wetsuit while I'm in line, because you might as well do something when you're staying in line at 50 people. And then down to the water, the race. So I'll give you guys a few quick tips here. Before we finish up. Top swim tip. Just because you are unique does not mean you are useful. Here's what I mean by that. A lot of folks kind of beat themselves up trying to be by themselves, getting annoyed by other people during the swim, not wanting to get kind of an elbow to the face, that type of thing. You will find, once you get used to kind of being in a pack of swimmers, there's a reason that all the professional triathletes race in packs, and there's a reason that most of the fastest folks are really, really close to somebody else. If you're that unique person in the water way off to the side, you're just fighting way more than the packs are. And generally pulling up beside the hip of somebody or pulling right in behind the feet of somebody is going to give you a lot easier swim. And yeah, it's a little rougher for the first 200 meters or so, but it clears out and it pays off really well to draft a little bit on the swim. So try not to go way out to the side and be that unique person who's kind of pulling your own line, and you'll save a lot of energy on the swim. Okay, the top bike tip. Keep it simple. What I mean by that is you'll see a lot of people on the bike and like, you know, a lot of times athletes will hire me during race week to go through their whole plan, and they've got this sport drink on the bike and these capsules and this supplement and these 2 different kinds of gels and these 2 different kind of bars and 4 bottles, and it just gets so hard because your IQ drops by like 40 points as soon as you start the thing. And then you've got like 18 different choices on the bike. Just keep it simple. I mean, for me, I do gels and do water, and then I have that little carrot on the end of the stick that gets me through each hour. So at the end of each hour, I give myself a bar that I'll grab from an aid station as I go by, or that might be a piece of banana, it might be some gels or some gummies to chew on or something. But that's it. If you want to take electrolytes, you can take them. You don't really need them. But if you know they kind of have a placebo effect on you, and you're used to using them, use them. But keep things simple on the bike. It just makes your day so much easier. You need 1 water bottle. These aid stations are only 10 miles apart. Unless you're going 10 miles an hour, you don't need 2 water bottles. You just need 1 bottle of fresh water to get you from one aid station to the next. So keep things super simple on the bike, and your day's just going to be a lot easier. You'll be carrying that much less and flailing around that much less. Yeah.
There's a stupid question, but there's so many different water bottles. What size are you
Oh, good question.
talking?
I like the big one that sits on your aero bars.
Was that
That's about
20
25 to
20,
30
okay.
ounces. It's 30 ounces max, but
Okay.
about 28 for the big ones. But generally right around 24 to 28 ounces is about a bottle of water. So I go through one of those an hour in conditions like this.
In 010, I used Guru, and on the first loop, because it was going to be rather warm that day, I used the lemon lime. It was so much sodium, so much potassium, yada yada, and it works well with my physiology. The second loop, I doubled it. It was 2 times the sodium, and it worked real well as a blueberry. Now, what do you think of that? That's electrolyte solutions that are mixed with water, as well as getting fresh water, say, every 10 miles or so.
Well, if you've trained with electrolytes, then you've trained your body to need salts. But if you train without electrolytes, then your body doesn't really need them, so it just keeps it that much more simple. If you're going to be doing a combination of a sport drink, like Guru and fresh water, you just want to be sure to keep track of the total number of ounces of fluid that you're consuming. Because generally, you do the best job not overhydrating or underhydrating when you drink when you're thirsty. But when all of a sudden your only source of calories is in the water, sometimes you're drinking a lot more often than when you're thirsty in order to get as many calories in as you need, or you're not drinking enough because you're trying not to consume too many calories. So you just have to be careful and make sure to plan ahead if you're going to do something like mix your calories in with your water. That's why I like to keep 2 separate personally. So, okay, top run tip. Hydration, key to basically, the main thing on the run is to keep track of where you're at. I say not only hydration, but also nutrition, meaning if someone were to pull up alongside you at any point during that run, you should know how many gels you've consumed or how many calories you consumed and how much water that you've had. Because if anything goes wrong, if anything blows up and you know, then you know what went wrong. So I keep track, and if I know that my stomach starts to hurt and I start to get tired and lightheaded at mile 11, and I've had, say, the equivalent of 150 calories an hour of gels up to that point, I know I'm hypoglycemic because I haven't had enough. And if I don't know, then I don't know. And I in the case where I know I'm hypoglycemic, easy fix, slow down, walk for 10 minutes, refill your energy stores, and then at that point, once you keep going, make sure that you keep yourself topped off with as many calories as you're supposed to be eating. But if you're just running along and not keeping track, then you don't know. So, this is a sport, and you do want to make sure you don't zone out too much during the marathon. So always know how much you're consuming when you're out there during the run. It's the biggest run tip I can give you. And it makes a little bit of a pain, but if you can keep track, you're gonna know more than 90% of the field when you're out there, and you'll know what to do. And then finally, if it's race day and you're having a bad day, when all else fails, I don't know how bright this is, you can use your minigun. You can call in for an airstrike. Or you can just break their necks. And remember, it's all relative if you are having a bad day. One example of a bad day.
Oh.
Another example of a bad day.
Oh.
And finally, an example of a very bad day, if you thought yours was bad. So, the last thing I want to do is, over the week as I was putting this together, I wrote out a plan that just walks you through. I put all the meals in there, and they've got calorie ranges on them, so it's it's kind of like if you're small, you choose the low end of the calorie range. If you're heavier, you choose the higher end of the calorie range. It's a training and nutrition plan for Ironman for 12 weeks out. So it's in Training Peaks. So if anybody's used Training Peaks before, it's an online training program that'll deliver your workouts to your phone or to your computer or to your email. And I wrote out all the swim, bike, run, weightlifting workouts and meals, along with the taper and the recommended races for 12 weeks out up to race day. Normally for a plan like that, I charge about $100. For anybody in here, if you go to tinyurl.com/12-week Ironman and you use discount code CDA VIP, is in Coeur d'Alene VIP, it'll give you that plan for $25. If you want to have kind of like a baseline to go off in the 12 weeks or 8 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever you want to use it leading up to the race. So steal of a deal on a training plan if you want it.